Come on, YouTube. How's it going, everybody? This has been a wild day for me. And for those that couldn't tell, like the stream definitely got up super late. So we'll give a few minutes for people to get in here, the usual, so you get past the however million ads YouTube tries to put on the front of a live stream these days. I really wish I could control that. Yeah, man, I thought maybe, like, because I hadn't worked last Saturday, maybe my work could slow down. It just, like, went extra crazy. So, yeah, that's fun. We'll be waiting a little touch before I get into the topic, but yeah, man, I kind of had to do this one like normally. So I'll give you guys a little idea into my process for live streams. Very typically over the weekend, I try to think of 2 to 3 options of something to talk on, and then during usually my lunch break at work, day of the live stream when I'm setting stuff up, I pick the topic I want. And a lot of times it's because Monday, if I think I need to, I'll do a little research. Again, during my lunch, like I'll answer some email. I'll take a little time to research a topic really briefly, or sometimes that means like finding other creators' videos and just listening to what they have to say. Sometimes it means like using my Google Foo and scouring the internet for like old articles versus forum posts and stuff like that. It kind of depends on where I feel, or if I feel, more importantly, that I need something extra on the top of my head. Not every time is that the case. A lot of times, I can just talk about my own experience, but sometimes I want a little bit more. Yeah, that had not happened at all this week. I actually didn't get to think about what I was doing until I was driving home. And part of that is my lady. So for those of you who saw the thumbnail, my lady created that photo by taking 2 photos, a picture of Papa Limo and a picture of one of the fish tanks, and using some editing software that she has and like merging them together, right? And it was kind of she was like, here's something cute you could use for a thumbnail at some point. And my only thought was like, my dogs, I wonder what my dogs at times think about when they sit and like stare into fish tanks. Because for the most part, they don't try to drink out of them. I've never seen them try to like paw at the fish or anything. And in looking at that photo, it was kind of like, it kind of looks like you're just like staring off into a reflection almost. And that kind of just sparked an idea in my head. And that is today's topic, right? So let's get into that. Reflections. Why hard lessons teach us the most. It's like we can learn easy lessons, like Bentley can talk about plants, or you could go watch Corey and learn about the nitrogen cycle. You could watch KG Tropicals and learn about African cichlids. You could go watch, pick your poison, right? Pick whoever you want. You could see a fish room tour of Gary Lang and learn about rainbow fish. Probably far better than you can from me. But those lessons don't sink in the way that the hard lessons do. So let me tell you a couple stories. Right, you guys probably all know my story behind losing my colony of zebra plecos. And if you don't, watch that video, seriously. I encourage you this because, one, you definitely can see the human side of a major screw up and how it taught me a lesson, right? But more importantly, I don't want anyone to have that problem. It sucked. It really sucked. But more recently, actually yesterday is when I lost a fish that I think is maybe underappreciated in my fish room. And no, if you're paranoid when I say that, no, it was not Danger Noodle. Don't worry, my girl, I would not be streaming if I lost Danger Noodle. My girlfriend would be in shreds probably. But for those who have followed for a long time, you will probably remember my little Shabunkin goldfish. Well, he's not little. He wasn't little anymore, but my little Shabunkin goldfish, Cycles. And I had bought Cycles 4 years ago now. Pretty close to that, at least. And I mean, when I got him, he was tiny. He's like this big. And my goal was I had been the recipient of a gift of duckweed in a bunch of plants I had bought. And so I had duckweed in a ton of my tanks. And Cycle's whole job was to, as a little bitty Shabunkin, go to a tank and eat the duckweed. And then move to the next tank and eat all the duckweed. And then move to the next tank and eat all the duckweed. So the joke being that he cycled through the tanks eating all my duckweed so that I'd no longer have duckweed. And man, was that little guy so efficient. And he had this kind of cool pattern that made him look like a kohaku koi. And for those that don't know, my dad, he's pretty big into fish. I found out, actually, my mom visited me this weekend. And I found out some stuff I didn't know, mostly because I was too young, right? I thought my mom was the bigger influence of fish when I was younger. And part of the reason, and eventually we'll get to this, because like I talked to my mom and I kind of reaffirmed, like, hey, you're still okay with eventually when some stuff calms down, filming a video with me and talking about just like when I was a kid, when we would go to the different fish stores and pet stores and just what that was like. And she was like, yeah, even though I don't really remember it all that well. And I was like, you can remember what it was like, though, getting me into the hobby. She was like, oh, yeah, we can tell stories about that. I was like, great, that's all I want. Because I think it's, to me, I remember every little fish store I went to, right? And each one has this like little specific warm memory that I can't forget. So it's kind of the thing. I think of my mom as the one that got me into fish. And I know this is like a really roundabout way to get to the story here, but trust me, just trust me. Go on this ride for a little while. Now, my mom told me this weekend when we were talking that, you know, your dad was really the one that had fish even when we first met before you were born. He had a fish tank. It wasn't me keeping the fish. And when, you know, we got married and had the house that you grew up in, he was the one that had all the fish tanks that came into the house. I was just the one that took you to the stores. And like, while I like fish, and the fish that, there was the agreement that the fish in the living room had to be fish that I like, and he could keep his koi downstairs. My dad was a big koi guy. So this is that, going back to that kohaku, that's going to tell you a little bit about Cycles. Just stay with me on this ride. All right. Your dad was really the one that was into fish at the time. And it wasn't until we lost all our koi one summer that it hit him so hard he never kept fish again. So when he lost his koi, whatever fish were in the house, as they passed, that's when we started slowly no longer keeping fish tanks in the house. And I mean, it took until I was in high school, basically, for the last fish tank to go away. And then when I was in college for a little bit, I had a fish tank with my cousin. But it wasn't, we didn't keep all the fish tanks going. They just slowly dwindled down, right? So when I bought Cycles, and I got him at the co-op, he was in a little a dollar adoptee bin. Somebody come in with a ton of fish out of a pond and dropped them off. And you know, Corey talks about this all the time. When they bring in a lot of fish, they usually have this kind of like adoption tank, so to speak, where there's a lot of like great deals on some fish. And in this case, it was like a Shabunkin goldfish, which we all know they're going to get huge, right? But they're pretty, and they, for me, it served a purpose. I was like, you know, I can keep this fish for a few years, and then I have friends, because I'm not a big goldfish keeper. I have friends that keep goldfish. I'll probably move him to someone who has a pond, so he has a nice big space to live. Well, I never did. And this is where we start getting toward the hard lesson, right? So Cycles he's cleaned all my fish tanks of duckweed. I really wish that he would have ate Rickia, because I had a massive Rickia problem in a tank, but that's another story. And as he got a little bigger, all his color went away. So he had this like beautiful orange splotch pattern that looked a lot like a kohaku koi. And as he got, so he went from about yay big to about yay big. During that time, he lost all his color, and he just became white. A big, white, beautiful fish, and you had that long Shibunkin finnage, not quite a comet, but a little bit longer. Still very pretty. And I didn't think too much of it. At first, I was worried, like, he was stressed, or maybe I was keeping the tank too warm. So, like, I messed with the tank parameters. I brought the temperature down, and, he was in the tank he ended up in. It lasts a 90-gallon and a half downstairs. And I kept rainbows in it. So, for a while, those rainbows were growing out, and the tank was probably much harder than it should have been, right? This is one of the first lessons. And then I noticed he was having trouble seeing. He was bumping into the glass and some of the stuff. So, like, I had some rock in there that I took out. And it wasn't very big, but I noticed when he was sifting around for food, he kept bumping, and he'd actually like hurt his lip a little bit. So I was sitting there thinking, and I watched it, and the lip healed, and he was able to eat, and I didn't think too much of it, although he kind of like this little downturn to his lip because he'd busted it a little bit, and it just the way it healed. And all the other fish looked healthy. I didn't see any sign of disease, but I started kind of researching in the background. Right? Well, come a year later, and I'm researching here and there, trying to figure it out. I'm really not having much luck. I talked to a friend and realized that he's probably got some kind of genetic issue. It's okay, that happens. He's a goldfish that came out of some random pond. Who can know what the fish is like? But I've never seen anything really impacting the other fish in the tank. All right, it's probably okay. Probably should be fine. I need to talk to one of my goldfish friends, and then that's when my work really started picking up. This at the time I was working for Intel. I was working a ton and then trying to do YouTube on the side, right? And slowly, like, his health seemed to just stay stable, right? But I noticed, like, he got big. I mean, he was like body about yay big boy, and he had plenty of body weight. So I figured it's just got to be something genetic. He lost his sight, and maybe that's also why he lost his color, as part of whatever has stressed him out. He's no longer showing his color. But I kept telling myself in the back of my mind, like, once every couple months, I really need to talk to my goldfish friend and get him out into a big pond where he can just live in cooler water, not have to fight these, like, rainbows. I'd purposely overfeed that tank like crazy to make sure that stuff would get down into the substrate where the rainbows wouldn't go, but he could just sift and find stuff and be okay. And it had been working. He'd been eating just fine and seemed okay. I kept it working more and more and more and more and more and more. Well, for those of you who know your goldfish, you know that 4 years is not what their lifespan should be. And he passed away yesterday. And I've been thinking in my head kind of about this puzzle, so to speak, of where did I go wrong? Other than I didn't move him to a pond where he'd have tons of room and definitely cooler water, probably more where he should be. I was keeping that tank about 74, which is okay, but probably be better if he was more like 70, high 60s. But I looked around enough and figured, like, okay, he's starting to get to the size of where he's grown out to a good size. I can more aggressively look here very soon. My friend who keeps koi and goldfish in a couple of outdoor ponds, she's going to start moving some of her younger fish out to the ponds. It'd be a good time with Cycles because they'll be about the same size Cycles is. Because he's only a shibunkin. He's not a koi. He's not going to be huge. He'll be all right, right? He'll have a bunch of fish his size, be in a big pond, and she's got a nice sized pond. And this is a gal, like, for some random reference. For those of you who've been around for a while, you'll remember I've talked about a gal who comes and used to buy plants for me regularly to feed to her goldfish. So she would spend $40, right, on plants for fish food. That's how much she loves her goldfish. And I use that generically because it includes koi, and she's got some big of the like big fantails. She keeps those ones indoors at all times, but she's got like some comets and koi and stuff that are all in an outdoor pond as they get to a certain size, and then when they have babies, whatever babies she can save in the pond, she'll bring inside for a while, and she'll distribute some to some of her friends, and then she'll keep some, and just slowly has built her pond up from there. So I thought back about it, and the thing that came to me first was, okay, how was I doing my water changes? And I did some math in my head, and it was like, I haven't been water changing that tank the way I should. I've been topping it. I've always kept good plant load to make sure the nitrites and nitrates and all that stuff are nice and safe. It's got plenty of filtration because it doesn't have a ton of fish in it. It's really just Cycles, like a few rainbows and a few corridoras. It's not a lot. I feed basically every other day so that I can heavy feed to make sure that the cories and Cycles have plenty of food down low and the rainbows don't eat everything. Right? So I have this plan where I purposely don't feed every day to minimize some of the waste, so that I can feed significantly more on one day and make sure that food's down low so they can eat. And I've never seen, like, outside of, some things that do happen with rainbows specifically, I've never seen issues of, like, fish that I felt were too skinny for what they are. They've always done well. So I never felt like I was underfeeding, but I thought about it and was like, well, my plants are helping filter the water, but is there a chance that the water acidified too much or something like that? So I started thinking about those kind of things and thought about like temperature. And temperature was something I didn't do for a while, and it was a major mistake until I'd watched some other YouTuber. I can't remember off the top of my head who sparked it in my head. It was like, I need to check the temperature, and then realized, like, oh, this tank that I thought I had at 76, I had at 80 because I'd been raising rainbows and I'm a dummy and forgot. And now that they're adult size, they don't need to be that warm anymore. So I kind of compiled a list of things in my head, and what it comes down to is I don't have the answer, right? And this is where this comes in. Because with my zebra plecos, when I lost them, there was a distinct thing I could point to. I knew what I did wrong. And it was a combination of several things, right, that caused catastrophe. But with Cycles, and I don't even know for certain that it's a genetic condition, just things point to it, but it can't be perfect because I haven't had, like, a vet or an expert look at him, right? So when I found him yesterday, it reminded me of a couple things. One, I know I screwed up. The hard part of the lesson is not knowing where or why. right? What caused him to die before he should have? So I've gone through my head, and I'm sitting there going like, well, there's XYZ reasons. You know, maybe water got a little acidified, but the rainbows would have shown that. The thing is, like, anytime water gets too acidic, it affects the slime coat of rainbows much faster than it would some of the other fish. Rainbows in general tend to come from harder water, more alkaline water, especially the rainbows I was keeping in there, Bozemanii and Wanamensis. It's like, okay, I don't know that it's that. I'm pretty confident the water's fine because I would have seen other issues, right? There's all these little things that I think about, but I also know to myself, I haven't tested the water in that tank in easily 6 months. Probably more. The filters were last serviced like 6 months ago. So I'm a little behind on that. But at the same time, I monitor their flow very, very well. And I can tell it's run 2 Tidal 110s are what run on this tank. I have a really minimal bioload. And I can usually tell by the way the filters are doing that they need to be serviced. Right? So I'm telling myself this, but that I'm sitting there going like, well, but right? I'm telling myself every little lesson that and part of it is like my free time is so so minuscule. It's so funny. Like I was trying to film something last night after I had gone in and checked on that tank and found him. And so like part of this thing is my immediate reaction was I've neglected this tank. I need to move the fish that I can and tear it down. My lesson to myself was in a time where I'm stretched really thin, this is the one tank that is the hardest for me to see, like when I do my normal moving around the house. And let me explain. So like when I go upstairs to say like my bedroom, I can see the tank where my wild-caught rubro striata are, and I can see my big rainbow and roseline shark tank, right? The one, like my first big tank when I came back to the hobby. I can see those easily. I can, at a glance, know what's going on. But that 90-gallon is in a corner behind where Fox's big enclosure is, so it's harder to see that tank. So last night, when I found Cycles, I moved Cycles, right? I got him out and put him where he can turn into plant food. This is the nicest way to put it. Then started moving the remaining rainbows and the corridoras that are in there. So there's nothing left in that tank. And I'm going to tear the plants out of it, because that's where my big mother, that massive, if you guys remember, Madagascar lace that was getting like 4-foot leaves. It hasn't been super happy in a while. I mean, it's still alive and it still grows. It like constantly like grows leaves about yay long and then just immediately melts. It grows them and melts them and grows them and melts them. It's been doing that for a while because it's like it's such a baby for CO2. But my lesson to myself was I'm overextended, and that one thing that I don't look at every day, because my voice went, I don't know, somewhere there. That one thing I don't look at every day because I have this plan in my head of how to feed it so that it makes sure that the Corys get their food, the rainbows don't eat everything, and that Cycles, before he passed, got food. led to neglect. My own schedule led to neglect. That's a hard lesson. Now, it would be way better to have those lessons that tell you, hey, this is the problem. This is why your fish passed. Way easier to know that. And I'm sure someone who knows goldfish way better than me could figure this puzzle out. They're definitely somebody, because like I said, in my return to the hobby, goldfish is one of the things I know a limited amount about. Because I've specialized into basically one type of fish with the small tidbit of knowledge in some others. And of course, general Aquarius knowledge. And that's what I applied to my little Shabunkin. Now, granted, during the years I had him, that guy got to eat like a king. Because you guys know, like, I'm always trying to find the best food I can. I feed frozen pretty regularly. I used to feed live brine when I was hatching lots of live brine and raising babies and stuff. That tank got live brine. So he was getting great food all the time. But something was going on. So my story here, my story time is basically to go on the thought of when we have a failure, when we have a catastrophe, when we screw up, it is easier to internalize those lessons because they hurt, right? And sometimes it's they hurt your pride. They hurt in the sense of, you know better, which this one especially is me. I knew better, but I fit into something that was convenient as opposed to something that was better. And had I taken that extra time to get there and get him to a different pond, maybe it wouldn't have happened. And that's the thing that kills me the most, is I know this person. She's absolutely wonderful. She doesn't live all that far away. It's just aligning schedules. And I've been working like a madman. So I led myself down a path I shouldn't have. And it sucks. But I had that lesson, and the first thing was, I need to tear that tank down. Because even after that, whatever is in there, or if I were to ever put something else in there, right now, I cannot manage it. Right now, it does not get the attention it deserves. Tear it down so that nothing else goes wrong. I have places I can put the other fish, right? The Corys can go in another tank that has mixed Corridoras. They'll do fine. They'll have some buddies instead of just being a little group of Adolphoi Corys on their own. Or they're actually technically duplicarious, but same diff. They can go live with Danger Noodle and the little army of Corys that's in there. So relatively soon, you might see one in the background. The rainbows can go in the big rainbow tank. They'll be fine there. And that's it. And I look back and I know that, I made a major mistake. And I can reflect on it and understand exactly where I went wrong. Make an immediate change so that that mistake impacts how I keep fish forever. Hard lessons teach us the most. It's easy to learn little cool nuggets of information from a video, a talk, chatting with a fellow fish person. I recently did, speaking of Rico Stan, who's in chat, and we'll get to Q&A here in just a sec. I did an interview with him last Saturday. I'll have a link on the community tab here soon. And we basically didn't talk fish. And what I learned in that, like the kind of the positive tidbit, is someone who, you know, I've gotten the opportunity to interact with in chats and various live streams, and quite thankfully he's been a member of the channel for a while and watched me for quite a while. We're like super kindred spirits in a lot of things. We have very similar backgrounds. We have a lot of similar interests. We chatted about cars in the interview. Like you'll get a idea. It's basically talking not fish. So if you're interested, check it out. I'll link it on the community tab. Unless Candy goes crazy and beats me to it, but I'll still put it on the community tab for those that are interested, because I had a lot of fun. Now, I know I had a couple questions, but for here on out, we'll slam those questions. It don't feel too bad for me, guys. Like I'm the guy that screwed up here, so like don't send too many sympathies. I made a boo boo, I made a dumb, if you will. It's one of my favorite sayings to myself is I made a dumb, because not only does it sound like horrible English, which is the point, but it kind of reinforces when I do dumb stuff, which happens every once in a while. I'm human. I make mistakes, man. But there was a good question super early on. So from here on out, just usuals, at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy to see in chat. You can ask anything. It doesn't have to be around today's lesson. It's free form here. And just a reminder for those that if you go to Dr. Blackstream after the stream, he's not able to stream tonight. He sent me a message. I want to make sure that we get that out there. He got unknowingly and unintentionally double booked. So that sounds like the significant other said you're doing something to me, but he's got something he's got to do, so he's not streaming tonight. Gary Duncan said, "Are you a fan of not using any blue in your lighting at all?" So, no. I like using very minimal amounts of blue. And part of that is, while plants can very efficiently use blue, they don't need a lot of it. So if you pump too much blue light at them, you're like almost guaranteed you're going to get an algae outbreak, because it uses a small amount of that light very efficiently. It's generally better for plants in our aquariums to have red and green light, and of course white. But as far as like the colored lights, when it comes to our LEDs and stuff like that, in general, you don't want too much blue. So I'm a fan of using very minimal amounts of blue, and not necessarily no blue. However, there are plenty of really, really good lights, like some of the best in the industry, that are pure white, and that's all they push. They don't have any of the like red, blue, green, yellow, cyan, magenta, pick a random color of LED you've seen. They don't have any of those. They're all pushing a specific spectrum of pure white. And some of those lights are like the most powerful lights that are out there. An example would be like a UNS Titan, right? Or some of like the Twin Star lights. I think ONF is similar, where they just have a lot of white. And some of them have pure white in some cases. And it's because us putting colored LEDs in there doesn't change the fact that white light is composed of everything on the spectrum, right? It's just a way to push extra of certain colors of light for whether it's aesthetic reasons or some level of science, just to make your lighting curve look special, when it might not actually be beneficial when it's at max power. There's a lot of reasons behind it. I could probably talk about that for much longer than I should. But in general, so like you'll notice that in most of my flue ball settings, I keep the blue light really low. And I'll push a lot of red or pink. But yeah, it's just blue in general tends to accelerate algae growth, or in some cases like is almost purely capitalized on by algae. So I try to avoid using too much of it. Mike from the Fish Tank Barn. Thanks, man. I appreciate the cup of, I'm going to say it's tea because I'm not a coffee drinker. I know, I'm the weirdo from Seattle that doesn't drink coffee. But I do love me some tea, especially in the winter. Or if I'm sick. Tea when I'm sick is wonderful. All right. I know there's some other questions. There's some and there's one note that I'll get to in a sec, but talking about like top level plants, we will get that in a minute. I just want to make sure I didn't miss another question up in the chat while I was going into my long tirade about me being an idiot. That's really what it comes down to, me being an idiot. It's part of life, man. You gotta admit when you're dumb. BCFR Aquatics. Best way to get food through a mat of floating plants. Don't want rotted food on top of duckweed and such to attract bugs. Yeah, I try not to have like a full mat of plants. In general, I'll manually remove stuff if I'm starting to worry about not having some open space to put food through. I do this all the time because like I float in a lot of my smaller tanks or bare bottom tanks. I will float water wisteria or water sprite, and once it starts covering too much of the surface, I just take 50 to 75% of it out, and the system recovers really quickly, right? Because usually I'm not feeding so much that the actual filtration in the tank can't handle things with my normal water change schedules, but the plants just act basically as a backup to make me slightly more dummy proof. Because as I just explained, like a lot of times when I have heavy plant loads, I'm kind of only topping tanks off just because it's really hard to get enough time to water change the like 20 something tanks I run, and my Python is slower than Hades. So praise will be the day when I can auto water change everything in my house, but that won't be until the Le Garage is actually free and I get to build that bad boy out, which might be this year. I don't know, man. COVID is like ruining. Trying to get a contractor right now is a nightmare scenario. My mother, we were talking about it. She's been waiting 4 months for someone to come out and insulate and this is part of where she lives too, to come out and insulate a storage unit, basically a like storage shed. She's been waiting 4 months and she's still on the wait list. That the companies that are out there, they are so busy with a lot of people who like are forced to work from home that have decided, well, I'm just going to make an addition to my home. There's been so many people doing that in like Washington that it's like impossible to get someone. And me and my mom, we're not the handy people, right? So plus, see, she just finished like kicking cancer's butt not that long ago. I'm definitely not going to expect her to like get out there and insulate a storage shed in the winter in eastern Washington where it gets cold and snows a ton. No. Plus, I can wait, right? I can wait. I'm keeping, now that I've made my big dum dum for a while, which I haven't done big dum dums in a long time, but up until now, like days since incident, days since stupid, but before that, I was looking pretty freaking good. Kyle's Aquarimetrics. I got it that time. Do your fish generally live a couple years? I'm always bummed if I get a bunch of fish and half are lost in a few months despite good water parameters. So I keep mostly rainbow fish, which can live a significantly long time if they're properly taken care of. In general, let me go back. So like I've almost lost the last of my Kochu tetras, and I've had those guys for 4 years, which they're a tetra, right? So, you expect a shorter lifespan on them than like most of your rainbow fish. It's hard to tell like in my guppy mansion just because there's like this million army of fish, and guppies, a couple of years out of a Moscow guppy is kind of like normal. If you get them living longer, that's kind of impressive. But for the most part, I keep fish that tend to live like at least 5 years, and that's like when you're not doing it very well. But yeah, I mean, I've had fish that I've lost very quickly, and That's been for a myriad of different reasons, especially when I got back in the hobby. Like, I will probably never own neon or cardinal tetras ever again unless I've like adopted them from someone, just because I have a horrible track record with those fish. Like, I always get the like skinny tetra disease, or just have a hard time getting them to last a reasonable amount of time, which for me, a reasonable amount of time in a tetra is 2 to 3 years. You could get them to live longer, but that's kind of like reasonable to me as far as those fish are concerned. And for the life of me, I cannot get that to work. But like my Kochu tetras, most of them got to like 3.5 years before I started to lose some. And now, like, you know, I'm getting toward, I think, 4 years since I first bought them, and I'm down to like 5 out of the like 85 I originally had. And they are jumpers and and all sorts of stuff. So, you know, I've lost a few of them jumping. I've lost a couple from a like heater going hog wild on me, and me catching it in time to keep most of them okay. Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of the fish I keep, so I don't know that like I can give the perfect answer there, because what I will tell you this, I don't think I've ever had a shrimp colony live for more than a year. And I have to go hunting this weekend in one of my filters on the Guppy Mansion, because I think either one, I really screwed up with shrimp. But I think what's happened is they've slowly made their way down into the filter, and I got to get them out. Because I saw a couple the other day, but I'm like, there's no way I lost 100 shrimp. Because if it did, I'm just the worst shrimp keeper known to man, even though I followed all the advice I could. So all the advice I got, and I still am terrible at shrimp. I've tried them in their own tank. I've tried them, you know, with other stuff. I've tried them in like massively established tanks. I'm horrible with shrimp. Horrible. To the point of where I'm almost about to give up. But I keep trying because, one, I'm an idiot. And two, I'm stubborn. So usually when I struggle with something, I will keep banging my head on the wall until I figure it out. That's part of why I'm really good at my job, is like when something isn't working, I will like basically like keep throwing myself at it until I figure out why. Which from the perspective of my job is really good, because that means when things break that my developers do, I do half their work for them by basically endlessly investigating things to make sure I've got as much data as possible, as much information, and as best an idea I have of what's going on. So when I send them that data, they basically have to do minimal work to figure out the problem and get it fixed. And in some cases, I actually know the answer for them, and it's just like, you need to do this. You did it. You did it. Oops. Here you go. Which I had one of those today. I knew exactly what the problem was. After like 2 hours of messing with it, sent all that information off to the developer, and hopefully it'll be fixed in the next like 2 to 3 days. Because it's not so good. EJ Fishes. Hey, Belly, my 40 breeder is in much better shape. Thanks again for all your assistance. Happy to help, man. That's part of why I give my email out so freely. I love helping people where I can. And sometimes I give you that honest answer of, I don't know. And usually the but comes with like, here's people that will know. Go research here. This is what I would do in your shoes. But most of the time, I can usually help. Especially if it's plant related or rainbow fish related. I'm pretty good at those things. I'm obviously very bad at shrimp. Don't ask me for shrimp advice. I'm the worst person in the world. I cannot crack the code on shrimp, man. I'm a complete dum-dum on shrimp. Mike Baker, like, congrats to your mom kicking some cancer butt. Thank you very much. Yeah, she fought. She's a little over a year now cancer-free for breast cancer. Just banged that bad boy out. You know, definitely had some fight, which, you know, not fun. But we come from real stubborn stock. Us Pascos, or in her case, last name's actually different, but maiden name and all that, but we don't need that stuff. But my mom is made from some real tough stuff. I almost want to tell you guys a story about my grandmother Grace, but that's not fish related at all. So maybe at another time we'll talk about it. All right, Stephen P. My water being 6 degrees of general hardness and 7 degrees of carbonate hardness, should I just give up on Monte Carlo forever? I'm not going to, but should I? So here's the thing, man. Monte Carlo can do okay in harder water because it's a calcium hog. But in general, to be successful with Monte Carlo, you almost always have to have CO2. And it's easier to do CO2 in soft water and supplement calcium than it is to have naturally hard water. So my question would be this. If you really want to carpet, have you tried Japan clover? Because Japan clover is probably one of the easier, like, carpet plants, or if you're really slick, pearlweed. You just have to trim it a lot, but if you keep pearlweed short, it looks freaking amazing. There was a Tank Tested just did a video with a carpet tank that was almost all pearlweed, and it looks amazing. It's absolutely beautiful. And my buddy Corvus Oskin has done that for a long time, so consider those. I wouldn't say necessarily give up, but try to identify what the real problem is, right? Is it the hardness? Is it something else? And feel free to shoot me an email, shoot me some pictures. I can try and help. But if you're not giving that bad boy CO2, that's going to be my first piece of advice, because that plant, all those small carpenters are really stubborn without CO2. Really, really stubborn, unless you're in, like, perfect water conditions, which is a nightmare. Ginger Graves, what's up? I'm in the process of working through that very same lesson. Hope to find a 55 or 75 gal at Petco. All 10s, mostly 20s, will be combined. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I want to. So I've been thinking about this. Like, whenever I build my fish room, at first my thought was I want to do 20s and 40 breeders. I want 20s to, like, initial raising and to put my breeding pairs in. And then the more I thought about it, it's like, maybe I should just go, like, nothing but 40 breeders. Like, pull the Dan's fish, right? Just all 40 breeders and just make it work. I don't know. We'll find out. Eventually I'll like crack the code of what I should do for myself, but I keep, like, leaning toward bigger tanks. But then, of course, in my fish room I'll have automation that'll help me, because I'm yeah. I'm like slightly a workaholic. If I didn't have work to do, I'd go crazy. I'd be like some weirdo on the street corner babbling randomly at people. I have to have some form of work. And usually that's some form, like 40 hours a week is part-time to me. Like, I'm such a psychopath. I don't know why I subject myself to this stuff, but I do, because I'm a weirdo. Yeah. And again, for guys, if I miss your question, bentley.pasco@gmail.com, shoot me an email. I will answer it. It usually takes me 2 to 3 days, typically. Right now, it might be more like 4 to 5, so don't send me emergencies, because I'm the worst person for that. But if you have questions, I'll happily get them to you. And then if I missed it in chat, just don't feel bad. Don't spam, but don't feel bad about repeating it, all right? Jason, do you have any experience with Florinbacter 1 and 7? Yes. If so, what's the difference? So I have mostly used Bacter 1. I haven't used the Bacter 7 yet, but I used to know the answer, because I sat there and I looked at all the Brightwell sent me a ton of stuff, and I got to play with a lot of their products. I actually like their Bacter quite a bit, but in general, I've taken myself to a point of where I've stopped using bacterial kickstarts, and just like, all my tanks are at capacity at this point. I'm even tearing tanks down, right? So I'm not trying to really set up new tanks. And when I am doing shifts around or I'm moving stuff, the way that I'm kind of kickstarting my tank is with what I like to refer to, because I stole this term, filter gravy. AKA, I'm going to take a sponge filter from a tank that's been running for a while. I'm going to move that thing over to that tank, and I'm going to squeeze all that gunk and crud out and put that beautiful, beautiful filter gravy into that tank, and bam, cycled like that. Every filter I have, they just instant bacterial colony. And it's way more effective because it's used to my water than any of the Bacter products. But In general, I would say just go with the fluorine Bacter 1. It's really, really effective. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the difference between the 1 and the 7 anymore. There is a difference. I think one was designed for shrimp and the other isn't. Because you can have some issues potentially. This is playing the ultra paranoid game with certain bacterial kickstarts in shrimp, but in general, they're going to accomplish the same goal. It's just looking for the small difference, and I don't remember that small difference off the top of my head. I hope that helps a little bit. Hi, Gore. For your shrimps can't be fun if you can't keep them, eat them. I don't think they're going to be very nutritious. And most of the time, if I lose them, I probably don't know because the guppies will get to it in the guppy mansion. But when they're alive, they're fine. Like I saw this super huge female, I think like 3 days ago. She was just chilling out on the Java Fern Wendelov like, what's up? I'm still here. And it was like, I know I should see more. I bought 100 of these things to start. And I mentally told myself, you will lose half because you suck at shrimp so bad. But then maybe 100 is enough to make it go. And that tank's soup, there's like algae, like little microalgae all over the place. It's really, really established. Like all my autosynclus are massive and fat. And there's still like glass algae and stuff like that. And like little bits on plants and stuff like, because it's like a lot of crypts and slow growing stuff. And it gets a lot of light. So it's like, I can make this work. And I sat and talked with Nick a bunch. I got lots of advice because Shrimpy Business is an absolute gentleman, super helpful. And he was like, yeah, dude, if you have struggles, just let me know. And I'm like, no. If I'm wasting money, I'm wasting money. I got to learn my lessons the right way. And one of the way I learned my lessons with shrimp is that like every time I've hurled money at shrimp, I screw up because I'm bad at them. Even though I follow as much advice as I can from people who are successful, I don't know what it is. I think I'm just cursed. It's just like Ludwigia tornado. I'm cursed with that plant. I've bought that thing 4 times now, and I can't get that stupid thing to live. You name almost any other aquatic plant, no problems. That one plant hates me to death. I don't know what it is. I'll figure it out one day, though. I'm going to keep banging my head on the wall, because that's just how stubborn I am. Brian K. You actually, you put something in the member Discord, which, by the way, if you're a member, you get access to the Discord at the Pseudomcgill or a higher level. And pretty soon I'm probably going to change membership. Just a heads up for you members. I'm just going to simplify it. I'm going to make it all like one tier. Bam. Everybody's going to get the same thing. I'm realizing in like hindsight being 2020, the multiple tiers is just dumb. I should just have one. It's simple and easy is better to me. And eventually my goal is if I ever get to the point of where, I can do things like kind of like how Corey does, where you can have that nice extra flow of behind the scenes content, which that's the only thing you're missing is like little like how-tos and behind the scenes. And a lot of it's just like some heads up. So for members, for example, have been getting some previews on some of the mock-ups that are coming through for the aquatic horticulture program. Don't worry, you guys will all see it eventually. Don't worry. The only thing they're seeing is like really early rough draft kind of stuff of what like I've been working on with the developer and stuff like that. That's like kind of stuff that I do for members. It's real small stuff. It's nothing huge. It's not like you're missing like some amazing lesson on fish. That's always going to be the free stuff. Don't worry. That will never be behind a paywall ever. That's my goal here. It's just my way to kind of show a little love to the folks that decide to become members. All right. Brian K. What's been a lifesaver for water changes is a small pump for pulling water out slightly faster than gravity, but a large pump to return water to a bucket filling from the sink. Yeah, I mean, I use a Python, so I'm empowering that water through, so it's like accelerated gravity, but part of it is just like the way my house is built. I can only do certain things, and that'll all change eventually, And one thing that I will say is, like, I can't wait to have automated water change so that I don't have to worry about that portion. And I'm working with, like, Dean on how to do the system, too, so I'll have, like, a true master of things to help me make sure it's right. But that's the one part I can't wait for. Just can't wait. It'll be a wonderful and glorious. Let's see. Melissa Foster, I appreciate the fingers crossed. Thank you so much. John Cox. Put some pieces of limestone in the shrimp tank. They need the minerals. So I do keep, like... I really regularly use things like Wonder Shell in my tank, and I do have crushed coral in there to supplement some of the buffer. The biggest problem is, like, that particular tank, I can't just, like, hurl big pieces of stone into it because of the way it's set up. But, yeah, I think in the future I will probably pick some, like, more mineral-rich stone for doing shrimp the next time I try shrimp, if it is as bad as I worry that it is. But I'm hoping just a bunch of them are in the filter, because I've had that before where, like, with a canister filter, they've gotten into it, and I just got to fish them back out. Paul Sotero, this feels so appropriate to what I just said. The best place to find stir-by fry is in the canister filter for my 120. What you don't know is, like, actually you just have a magical canister filter that makes stir-bys for you. It's not the fry. They just make them manufactured. I've done that with I used to have this, like, big Endler colony in my little 20 long that was in my bedroom that it's been down for a long time now. I haven't had it running forever. And every time I would service the little canister filter that was on there, I would find easily 20 little Endler fry in there, just like, oh, it's light. That's nice. Like, get back in the tank, silly fish. The problem was, like, at the time, I didn't have a good sponge filter for it as an intake, and man, it just a couple fry every once in a while. It'd be like the teeny tiny babies that were fresh born that would get in there, and then they'd be alive like a month later when I serviced the filter. Some of the things that fish can live through, it's incredible. Stephen Peter, pro wood growing machine. Yeah, I mean, trying to grow from, you're trying to do some complicated thing with that's your problem. You're trying to be complicated with Monte Carlo. Gotta keep it simple. That's what I do. It's be a dummy. Keep it simple. That's my life. Kyle's Aquarimetrics. Man, twice I got that right. This is going to be the only time. You know that, right? Shrimp and fish losses in general, sometimes things just go wrong for no apparent reason. It's something I don't feel like is talked about enough. Appreciate your candor. You know, dude, I think part of one thing that Rico, Stan, and I, which, like, if you really want to get a peek into who I am outside of fish, other than, like, I've done a video on it, and I'll probably do a newer one sometime soon, watch that interview. Seriously, because we talk, like, barely about fish. But one of the things that I have always felt was really important to me about being YouTube. Wow, I can English. And I'm probably going to go a little later because Dr. Black's not streaming tonight, so don't worry, folks. We'll get some extra questions. Don't be like, oh my god, it's almost 7. We're down to the wire. I told myself that if I ever got to the point in my fish channel where I was not genuine about myself, who I am, when I screw up, when I do something right, whatever it is, if I'm never, the second that it comes into my head to hide this or not talk about that or be a character, some of you may know where some of those references are. I don't usually talk bad about other YouTubers, but one thing I will say that disgruntles me is when YouTube people are not genuine with who they are. And one of the, like, this is slightly story time, but for a lot of you guys know that, like, you know, I have a really good relationship with the Aquarium Co-op in the sense that I've been a customer of theirs for the whole time I've been back in this hobby, basically put. And while, like, I don't have a super close friendship with Corey or anything like that, you know, we have kind of a mutual acquaintance of each other. Like, we're both really busy guys. We don't really get to sit and talk very often, but we see eye to eye on a lot of things. There was a while back when Corey talked about how, part of what he had to do was refine his passion. And like, you can see the difference. You can see in his videos when that immense passion for what he was doing was slipping, right? It was part of, well, this is part of the business. This is what I have to do. And you could see it was wearing on him some. That passion for fish keeping had lost a little bit of its gleam, its drive, right? And when it was one of the Real Fish Talks, I think, one of the like very last Real Fish Talks, where he talked about it very directly. And it was one of those things where it was refreshing to see someone else, especially at his level, that had no issue being very direct and open about who they are as a person and what they were dealing with. Right? And it's one thing that I've told myself the entire time I've been doing YouTube, seriously doing YouTube. I use big quotation marks because, right, this is still my hobby. Is that I want to be genuinely me at all times. I never, ever, ever want to not just be genuine to who I am as a person. Because I definitely feel there are plenty of people out there who are a character, or they only show this one side, or that maybe they're overly scripted, right? So to the point of where, like, yeah, it's what's efficient, it's what makes the videos clean and concise, but it loses personality. It loses that feeling of who that person is, and they just become a voice rather than a person. And it's one thing, like, you will notice that, like, my videos are never fully scripted, and I don't plan them ever to be. Like, I'll bullet point things that I want to talk to, but I never intend to be fully scripted, because I feel like part of who I am would immediately be lost. And the second that's lost, this is no longer fun. And if this isn't fun, it's not worth doing. Right? Like, I think too many YouTubers, especially small YouTubers that get into this try to play this game, so to speak, try to do it for money, and don't do it because it's fun. And you can see it. You can see it in the content. That's part of, like, I really appreciated Rico Stan and I. We were talking before we went live. We actually talked so long we missed the time we were supposed to go live by like a minute or something. We were like, oh, we're supposed to be live. Uh-oh. But there's this thing where we talked about being really open and honest, and why we as consumers of content, because this is the same thing, like, overly scripted channels I can't watch. And I watch a lot of, like, non-fish stuff and fish stuff at the same time, and it's like constant audio in my ears while I'm at work, because it helps me, for some reason, if I don't have some kind of white noise in my ear, but usually something I can learn something from, I work way worse than I do. Like, I could never work in silence. I would lose my mind. But it's like, not having that is, for me, a huge turnoff. So why would I ever do that in my content, right? But it's kind of something we talked about. And if you want to get a little, like, peek into, like, this psychotic brain, check it out. Halo Fins and Flora. I appreciate the little sticker. A little Sheba. I think that's supposed to be a Sheba, which my little Sheba half mixed girls are tricolor, so they're mostly, like, black, but one is, like, got that big cutesy smile like that little sticker does. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Reminds me of my little girl Lulu. She's such a sweetheart, and she's the one that has to get the plastic surgery. So that's gonna be fun. If you guys missed that last week, I talked about how my dog needs a lift, so to speak. Crazy Ninja. I gotta add 10 2-inch fish to a new 75-gallon. I'm going to use some cycled media in a new filter. Any tips for avoiding ammonia spikes? Yeah. So depending on what the fish are, this might be tough, but start with feeding every other day at first, or feeding very lightly every day. So, like, if you would normally feed a teaspoon of food, I'm just using this as random, right? Then feed half a teaspoon. Feed half what you normally would for, say, the first like week, and let that initial bacteria kickstart, whatever, however the cycle media you have, proliferate throughout the tank a little bit more, because within a week, you're going to be good. If you already have a live bacteria colony from some other cycled media, within a week, you're fine. So just feed a little lighter. And then from there, you can kind of steadily go back to normal feeding. You should be just fine. You should be just fine. But good thinking about that, right? Like, good to think, first off, I'm adding 10 of these fish. They're 2 inches. I mean, granted, in a 75-gallon, if you got plants, you should be okay. But taking it safe, very, very smart. Very, very smart. The Fishy Mailman. Good to see you, buddy. I keep buying all sorts of Ludwigia. I tend to kill them all somehow, even though most are easy. So I feel the pain. Dude, you know, I love... Probably the Ludwigia I love the most is the Arcuata Cross Repens. Because I love that leaf shape, but it gets that Repens coloration. It's either that or Ludwigia Atlantis, because it's also a naturally occurring hybrid, and it's just beautiful. But man, that tornado, I love the way it looks so much, and I want to keep it because it just looks so wild. But that plant just hates me, dude. It hates me so much, and I'm gonna crack the code on it. I know I will, but man, it's driven me up the walls because I've kept way harder plants and had them flourish and do fantastic. And then that plant, which is a little hard, but not as hard as some of the other stuff I kept, is just like, nah, man, good luck. Like, everything's gonna bite you a little bit, otherwise you don't get to have too much fun. Gotta have your downfalls with all your successes. So it keeps us straight and humble. Reminds us we're not perfect, we're human, we screw up. And sometimes those screw ups are fantastic. Like, you screw something up and something wonderful happens, you get living sponges in one of your tanks. That's pretty sweet. I'm sure I screwed up and that's how I got them, but I've been loving them since. Patrick Hardy, thanks for your first comment, man. Dude, you know, one of the things I will say is, like, I love people who leave comments, questions, whatever it may be in videos. I love that interaction. And a lot of times it's really simple, right? Like, if I heart your comment, it means I read it. And, you know, very often, like, you get some really cool insights into who the people are from the perspective of being a creator and understanding the people who watch you. Like, I've seen some interesting questions recently where it's like, hey, can you go like super deep on this? And it's like, you know, the point of the video is to get a high level understanding of something. And that's, you're talking about this like really specific scenario that I'm not even that well versed in. You know, it's kind of like you get some interesting back and forth that go along that, but also just like some of your guys' stories are like really interesting to see how like similarities in our lives that have happened or our fish keeping and stuff like that. It's just a cool way to understand like the people who give me their time. Like, if you're giving me your time watching videos, you've given me something more precious than anything else. And I as somebody who works too freaking much, just obviously admitted that in the story tonight. You know, my time is very precious. So I have to realize that if 1,000 people or 500 people or even 100 people, 10 people when I first started YouTube were giving me their time, that's even more precious than my time, right? I have to look at it like that, because otherwise, why do I do what I do if I don't value other people's time? It's one of the few like personal rules I have, is that I realize how valuable my time is. So I have to make sure that I see other people's time as even more valuable, because you never know each person's situation, and that might be the only time you ever get to interact with that person. And you never know like what you could learn, what you could be inspired by, whatever it may be. Or more importantly, you could have the flip side of that, what that person can learn, what that person can gain and benefit and spread, pay it forward, look at it whatever way you want to. Every interaction that can be out there is precious. It's a way I've lived my life, right? Is just there's this like ancient lesson from a long time ago when I was in college from a professor of mine who said your next best job is sitting right beside you. And the lesson behind that was that, most of the time the best jobs that we ever get or the best experiences in our life often come because of the people that we get to know and network with. The people that we get to call our friends, call our acquaintances, call our coworkers, whatever it may be. The people that we have positive interactions with often are the people that lead to the best portions of our life, whether that is getting that better job, whether it's that like that one, like you get invited to, hey man, I got this extra ticket to a concert or to a sports game or whatever it may be, right? That experience that will eventually stick in your head forever, right? It's something that influences you for the rest of your life. It has nothing to do with like yourself often. It tends to be the people around you. And it's a lesson I've always internalized because I think it's really important to teach, not just from a working perspective, right? Although that's a good one. It's also kind of a generic, like, it's subconsciously a lesson to tell you, don't be a jerk. Be cool to people. Because you never know what's going to happen based on one encounter, working with somebody, meeting with somebody, becoming a friend with someone. You never know where that's going to lead you and what positive influence that can have now, not only on that person, but most importantly on yourself. It's a life lesson. You get random life lessons out of me every time I do this because I have some weird ones at times, and sometimes I actually have good ones. Mr. Fish, sir, do one of your cartoon voices. Oh, sir, how dare you? All right, one sec. I need to try to think what I can do if I've done anything I haven't done. Probably not. I think one of my favorite voices to screw around with that I mess with my girlfriend with all the time. Here we are, established here in the 1930s and 20s of radio. We're looking at the live stream chat, some kind of voodoo technology that no one will understand. We've seen these various colored things in this window over here. I don't understand what it does. It apparently is some form of monitor. Nothing like what I experienced in my life. I've lived my entire life enjoying baseball and occasionally a Ford automobile. Don't forget to read your daily newspaper. That's where all your news comes from. Clearly, it's not from this strange contraption here. Have a wonderful day. I like screwing around. What can I say? I don't do a lot of cartoony voices. Most of mine is pitching my voice in different directions. But there are certain things I have a really horrible Scottish accent that I like to do for fun. But that usually involves certain groups of friends. It's really what it comes down to. Crazy Ninja, thanks for answering my question. I'm adding Mabuna. Oh, you're one of those crazy African cichlid people. So yeah, I think if you feed every other day, just as a follow-up, you shouldn't see too much aggression, especially at that size. Your tank should, within a week, probably be okay. And don't be afraid if you get a bacterial bloom at the water, you get that cloudy water look. Don't be afraid of that. That's kind of natural when you do a little spike, but usually it's not something that it's unsafe. Christine Kaiser, Bentley, how many Melanitania Herbert axelrodi, aka the yellow rainbow fish, for a 40 breeder? So keep in mind, over time, Herbert axelrodi get pretty big. They can get up to 5 inches. So if your goal is to keep them long term, I would go for a small breeding colony. I would do something like 2 or 3 males and 3 to 4 females. Especially, I would probably target 3 male, 4 female. Or if you really want to go crazy and guarantee breeding, you could do 2 male and 5 females, right? Lots of girls, makes it a lot easier to breed those fish. But in general, both male and female have good color, a lot like the turquoise rainbow. So it's okay to have extra females because they'll still have good color. The only difference is you don't see as much of that beautiful red in the finnage. That's usually more a male trait than a female trait. But that brilliant yellow body, females have that just as much as the males. So that would be what I'd shoot for. It's a little safer that way. You could push higher if you know that like 2 years from now, as they start hitting 3 inches and start to grow a little bit past that, they slow down and they're growing, that you know, like, I'm going to eventually upgrade to a 125 or a 75 or something like that. You could do more. You could do something like 10 to 12 fish, but if you want to play it safe, you know, somewhere between 6 and 8 fish is pretty safe. Woo! Oh, chat, stop jumping on me. Sci-fi swordsman. Bentley, do you know anyone on YouTube that makes the deeper dives into aquarium subjects, individual plants, fish, other areas? So it depends on how deep you want to go. You can get guys like Dr. Novak who go pretty deep on a lot, mostly just like anoxic filtration. You can get like Bulk Reef Supplies channel that does some like really technical stuff. You can get Corvus Oskin, who does like pretty good plant profiles. They're not like crazy science deep, but he goes really deep on each individual plant that he does in a relatively short video. So he teaches you basically everything you need to know for that plant. It's hard to find super deep stuff because the biggest problem is like when you go too deep in the world of YouTube, and a lot of it is like people being kind of a slave to the algorithm in a sense. When you go too deep, you lose a lot of people. And a lot of us are like looking to generally get just enough in there to where somebody who is an experienced aquarist will still learn a little bit, but someone who is new will learn a lot. I tend to go a little deeper than most people. That's mostly because I talk too much. But it's tough. Like, you can find some of that content here and there, but what you tend to find is like the people who did that at first have shifted away from it. And it's really hard to find good science-y channels in the fish fam in general. I think there's room to do it. You know, Secret History Living Inside Your Aquarium, like he touches on a lot of stuff here and there. But at the same time, there's other times where like he doesn't go as deep as he could, where it feels like he's going to, but then doesn't. So I don't know. But he's a buddy of mine, so I razz him a little bit only because like I've given him feedback in the past of things that I think he could do to like really up his game. But a lot of it is like there's a trade-off for doing that, and you know he does good stuff. I like what he does. Alec the Nice, I just set up a BCB basket, so that's a biocenosis clarification basket for anoxic filtration. Cool, man. Are you doing that inside a sump or something like that? Be curious to see. I think whenever I do an anoxic combo system, I'll probably do a plenum, just because I think that's a easier to make the combo system I have in my head work properly. But yeah. Christine Kaiser, you're more than welcome. Mr. Fish, you're also welcome, sir. Oh man. Oh, I actually caught up to chat. Man, that means I missed something, clearly. Or that I should probably stop talking. One of those two. So we're actually kind of at a good point, I think. I'm going to tell one little story. I said I was going to save it for another time, but I'm going to tell the story, and that'll be what I end on. I'm going to talk about my great-grandmother, Grace. This has nothing to do with fish. So, if you want to fish content, feel free to go. I understand. So, when my great-grandmother was getting a lot older, she started dealing with Alzheimer's, right? She would think that me and my cousin Henry were our dads. So she thought we'd come in and she'd be like, "Oh, Dan and Hank, how are you?" Which Dan is my father and Hank is my cousin Henry's dad. And They'd be like, no, Grandma, it's Bentley and Henry. And Dan is my dad and Hank is his dad. Oh, that kind of stuff. But so she got to a point where we had to get her into an assisted living facility just because the family couldn't do everything that was necessary to make sure she was getting the best care possible. Right. And it sucks because I grew up with my grandma for a while as like kind of my babysitter. So it's one of those things where it's like when there's that distance and it's not in one of the family homes, it makes it feel weird when you visit, right? We still visit her all the time. And I remember when she was very close to passing, which she was in her 80s. She'd had a pretty full life. My mom had gave me a call and said, we don't think she's going to make it. She'd had a stroke. She had a lot of strokes, by the way. And we think we're going to pull her off life support. And I was like, well, let me get down there before you do that. Let me see her one last time. She's like, no, I want your last memory to be a good one, not this of in person with Grandma. And I was like, yeah, all right. And I sat there and said, it can't possibly be her time. And something to understand is my grandmother had a Bible with her everywhere she went. I am not super religious. Most of my family is not super religious. My great-grandmother, very devout. Now, the best part about my grandmother, not preachy. She just believed, find what speaks to you and follow that. It's a lesson she gave me early in my life. I think I was like 16 when she told me that. It was something that's always stayed with me. But usually outside of religion, but more in the sense of like, find what speaks to you and follow that has been a lesson in my life. So then they're going like, Grandma ain't gonna go yet. That woman's a saint. There's no way with how devoted she is and how she lived her life, which she is a person who, to her, when people needed money, she didn't care. She would always say, it's only money. That's not what matters. It's only money. Helping someone's more important. This is my grandma. She's a saint. Truly, to me, at least. That's Saint Grace. So I'm sitting there with my mom, and it's kind of that denial thing, right? You don't want to lose someone that you're close to. My mom's like, yeah. So she calls me later. She goes, so I sat down with Grandma. We're getting ready to take her off life support. And I took her hand. I said, how you doing, Grandma? And granted, she had been in a coma for like 5 days at this point. And she just turned and looked at my mom and said, oh, I'm fine, dear. We're stubborn people. My mom told me, she's like, I jumped out of my chair. I about had a heart attack on the spot. I screamed for your aunt. And she came running in. We couldn't believe it. And I remember she told me that story. And I think I was like 23 at the time. And I broke into like happy tears. And I remember it now kind of fondly. And I was just like, I told you she's a saint. I told you they ain't taking her yet. Oh man. It's something that just like, it's so my grandma too. Cause I can remember when she'd had like, I don't know, something like 8 or 9 strokes when I was younger. And every time she got better. It was like, I swear, it's like her health gets worse and worse and worse. She has a stroke, she recovers, she's fine. Like, totally not how life works, right? And it's one of those things where after a stroke happens, yes, usually a person can improve their condition a little bit because the things that were causing the problems lead to the stroke. Like, that goes through if they somehow survive multiple strokes. And hers weren't like really, really bad ones. But it's just one of those things where it's like, I will remember that to that day. And like one thing, as a person who I'm not very religious, I have her Bible. is the only thing, when she finally did pass, that I wanted to make sure I had with me and could eventually pass on to a family member, whether that's I ever have kids or through like my cousin's kids or something like that, is her Bible. Because while I am not devout, it is a warm memory to me of something that Grandma was never without. This is a woman who would watch like church TV from when she woke up until Wheel of Fortune. She loved Pat Sajak. When Wheel of Fortune was over, she was done for the night. She would go to her room, when she lived with us at the house, that is, when I was young. And she would, read her Bible for a while and go to bed. That was every day with Grandma. Those little things that trigger the warm memories. That's what matters most, right? Because then that's how they live through us. It's the way that I like to think of it, philosophically speaking, is all those positive things that she influenced me, I make sure that they're felt in some way, shape, or form through my actions. Personal philosophy about how we never truly lose people if we always live in their memory. That's how I'm a weirdo. That's the closest to spiritual you'll probably ever hear me get. So, with that non-fish story being said, y'all have a fantastic night. I'll see you next Tuesday. We have another chapter of Filtration 101 this Saturday coming. And it's a short, simple one, but I think you guys will like it. Let me know. Definitely leave comments and stuff. That's the stuff that I love the most. It's kind of interaction, seeing how you guys like the way that I try to teach lessons by rambling way, way long on things. On something that probably, if it were a scripted video, would probably be 5 minutes, and then I ramble for 25. Anyway, you guys, take care. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, stay awesome.